plant your roots in it. Dusty headlight dance with your boots in it. You write her name on it, spin your tires on it, build your cornfield whiskey bonfires on it. You bet your life on it. It's that L-shaped red rust clay. You grew up on that plowed up ground that your dad damned his luck on. That post-game party field you circle up on. And when it rains you get stuck on. Trip the cloud back behind county roads that you run up the mud on her jeans that she peeled off and hung up her blue-eyed summertime smile. Looks so good that it hurts. Makes you wanna build a 10% down white picket fence house on this dirt. You mix some sweat with it, taking a shovel to it. You stuck some crosses and some painted goalposts through it. You know you came from it, and someday you'll return to this L-shaped red rust clay. You grew up on that plowed up ground that your dad damned his luck on. That post-game party field you circle up on. And when it rains you get stuck on. Trip the cloud back behind county roads that you run up the mud on her jeans that she peeled off and hung up her blue-eyed summertime smile. Looks so good that it hurts. Makes you wanna build a 10% down white picket fence house on this dirt. You know you came from it, and someday you'll return to this L-shaped red rust clay. You grew up on that plowed up ground that your dad damned his luck on. That post-game party field you circle up on. And when it rains you get stuck on. Trip the cloud back behind county roads that you run up the mud on her jeans that she peeled off and hung up her blue-eyed summertime smile. Looks so good that it hurts. Makes you wanna build a 10% down white picket fence house on this dirt. Makes you wanna build a 10% down white picket fence house on this dirt. You know you came from it, and someday you'll return to it.
I was meant to be by your side, and I have waited here a long time for you to turn around and notice me. But now you're here, holding hands with me. Walk me down the middle of the county fair. Walk me down the middle like you don't care. Walk me by the Ferris wheel and make sure that she sees. Let the whole world know you belong to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will resume in 2 minutes.
I've heard about your bitter Walk me down that aisle in your finest shirt. Let the whole world know you will walk me down the middle of the county fair. Oh, walk me down the middle like you don't care. Walk me by the Ferris wheel and make sure they all
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Eric Erickson.
Everybody enjoy lunch? Great. Folks, I am a native of Louisiana. In 1993, I fled my home state because my parents they felt forced to put on the back of their car a sticker that said, "Vote for the crook, it's important." Because Edwin Edwards, God bless him, was running against David Duke. And we all voted Democrat that year. Well, at least they did. I just decided I can't stay in this place. I had grown up in Dubai. I come back to Louisiana and got to deal with something like this, third world politics in America. So I fled to Georgia, met my wife, and have lived here ever since. And I never really thought I could go home again. I'd go home during the summer to the East Feliciana Parish, gorgeous country, God's country. And potholes everywhere. Everybody is in the state. All of my friends worked for the state. They worked for the prison system. They worked for the state system. And it was just, it was like going into a third world, just shocked by the number of my friends who didn't know any better, couldn't go beyond the parish lines. We had parishes, not counties. We still do. And as much as I love LSU, go Tigers, I just wasn't sure that I could do anything. So I live in Georgia and wear purple and gold. And people stare at me. And we have Mardi Gras parties at our house. And then, so this guy gets elected. No one thinks he can get elected, and yet he gets elected after Katrina and the disasters of Democratic rule in the state for so long, and even Republicans who had D's next to their name before they had R's next to their name, but they still thought like D's. And this guy had always had an R next to his name. And suddenly my friends are getting jobs in the private sector that hadn't existed until then. The roads that used to take out your axle by the time you got to my parents' house were smooth. Places where there was farmland had houses. Rural areas had become suburbs. Schools had improved. And then there's the part of New Orleans where, kids were struggling. It was a civil rights issue. Parents couldn't get their kids good school because there were no good schools. And so the governor of Louisiana said, well, let's get them into schools that are good. The Obama administration fought him, and he fought back. And kids in Louisiana are able to get good education now. Businesses are in Louisiana now, and so kids can graduate from high school and college and get good jobs now in a way they couldn't when I graduated from high school. And it is all thanks to probably one of the smartest men ever to run for president of the United States, and surely the best governor Louisiana has ever had, my friend, Governor Bobby Jindal. Thank you, man. Absolutely.
Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Thank you for that very warm reception. Eric, thank you for that very generous introduction. Now, I want to bring your attention to something. You may have heard the president say this a couple of days ago, and I'm amazed it hasn't gotten more attention. I highlighted it in the debate last night, but I just want to bring your attention to something the president himself said. Now, this isn't me criticizing the president. This is President Obama in his own words. He's trying to defend a very bad deal with Iran. And one of the things he says is, we don't have leverage with China. He said, even if we wanted to try to force Iran to come to better terms, we don't have leverage with China because we borrow so much money from them. We need them to buy our debt. And his argument was, therefore, we've got to accept this bad deal because we are now in this weak position. Now, folks, think about this. We've got the President of the United States saying because of his failure to control spending, because of what he has done to grow the government. We're now in no position to push China. We're in no position to get a good deal with Iran. So President Obama has admitted to us his failure to control spending has weakened the United States on the world stage. Folks, you can't make this up. I mean, I've been going around the country saying this is the most important election in my lifetime. But let's be honest, when was the last time you ever heard a politician say, this election's not important, don't worry about this one? Politicians say that every election. But this election really is the most important election of our lifetimes. Now look, I could stand up here and tell you about a lot of bad things this president has done. $18 trillion of debt, an EPA that is strangling our economy, Obamacare that has put bureaucrats between patients and their doctors, our failure to stand with Israel, this weak agreement that will allow Iran to become a nuclear power. But maybe the most dangerous thing this president is doing is what he is doing to redefine the very definition and idea of America. This president's working hard to change the definition of the American dream. Look, every time you listen to him speak, every time you see what he does, it is all about dividing us. It is all about dividing us by geography, by age, by gender. It's all about redistribution. You know, you got to give Bernie Sanders credit. At least he's honest enough to call himself a socialist. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, they're no better. They're trying to change the American dream into the European nightmare. They are celebrating dependence on the government at a time of record low participation rate in the workforce, record high participation rate in food stamps. They're trying to make more and more of us dependent on the government. I don't know about you, but that is not the American dream that our parents taught us. I want to share with you my personal experience, and then I want to tell you what we've got to do to fight and reclaim that American dream for our children and grandchildren. Now, the reason this is so personally important to me, my parents, they have lived the American dream. My dad is one of 9. Literally grew up in a house without electricity, without running water. Was the first and the only one in the family to get past the 5th grade. I know because we heard these stories every single day growing up. Good luck trying to get an allowance out of a dad like that. But here's the amazing thing. Over 40 years ago, the first time my parents ever got on a plane, my parents came from halfway across the world. My mom was pregnant with me. They had never visited America before. They never even met somebody who had been to Louisiana and could come back and tell them what it was like. They were coming to an idea as much as they were coming to a place. They were coming to the idea of freedom and opportunity. They were coming to the American dream. And they left behind their parents and their families and their friends. And by the way, they came legally when they came to the United States. Now, I know you're not supposed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Folks that want to come to America should come legally, should learn English, should adopt our values, and roll up their sleeves and get to work when they get here. You know, it is just common sense that you should want to be an American if you're coming here. We're not forcing anybody to come here. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of all the division. I'm tired of all of this nonsense from the president and the left. Folks, we're not African Americans. We're not Asian Americans. We're not rich Americans. We're not poor Americans. We're all Americans. Let's end all this hyphenated Americans. We used to proudly proclaim America as the great melting pot. The left wants to turn us into this salad bowl if we let them do that. Look at what's happening in Europe. Second, third generation of immigrants that don't consider themselves part of those societies and those cultures. We don't talk enough about this. We need to insist on assimilation and integration. Make no mistake about it. Immigration without assimilation is invasion. We must not let that happen in America. You know, going back to my parents' story, so they land in Baton Rouge. My mom goes to school at LSU, and I love what my dad does next. He has come here to work, but he knows nobody. Doesn't know anybody in Baton Rouge in Louisiana, so doesn't know what else to do. He opens up the Yellow Pages and starts calling company after company looking for work. I don't know how long it took him, but he finally wears down a guy from the railroad company. Guy tells my father, without even meeting him, you can start work Monday morning. And I love what my dad tells his new boss. And by the way, there's some young people in the crowd here today. Never do this on a job interview. It's like one of the 10 worst things you can tell a new boss. My dad tells his new boss, hasn't even met him yet. He goes, that's great. He goes, look, I'll start Monday. He said, but I don't have a car, I don't have a driver's license. So he tells his new boss, you're going to have to pick me up on the way to work Monday morning. I mean, who does that? The guy was so taken by his enthusiasm to work, he did that. Now, 6 months later, I was born at Women's Hospital, great hospital in Baton Rouge. I was what you would politely call a pre-existing condition when I was born. That's okay. I've been called worse by the press. That's okay. But there was no Obamacare. My parents' insurance didn't cover me, and I love what my dad did next. He went to that doctor in Women's Hospital. No contracts, no government forms, no paperwork. Just two guys standing in a hallway. My dad went to that doctor and said, I'm going to send you a check every month until I pay this bill in full. That's just what people did. You know, it was a simpler time back then. I'd ask my dad, I said, now how do you pay for a baby on layaway? If you skip a payment, do they take the baby back? I mean, what do they do? He said, you were such a bad little baby, I would have sent you back if that were an option. He goes, no, don't worry, you're fully paid for. Nobody's coming to get you. The reason I tell you that, my parents came here to chase the American dream. They've caught, they have lived the American dream. I want their children, I want their grandchildren. I want my children and my grandchildren one day to be able to chase and live that same American dream. I want your children and grandchildren to be able to chase and live that American dream. That's what's at stake in this election. Now look, you're going to hear a lot of candidates running for president who are going to sound great. They're going to say all kinds of things. They're going to tell you they're going to shrink the size of government. They're going to tell you they'll fight for school choice. They'll tell you they'll fight against Common Core, and it sounds great. They'll all say the right things. We've got a lot of great talkers running for president. The problem is we've got a great talker in the White House already. If great talk was enough, we'd be on Easy Street right now. Folks, we cannot afford 4 more years of on-the-job training. We need a doer, not a talker. I'm not just talking about cutting government spending in our state. Since I've been governor, we've cut our budget 26%, 30,000 fewer state government bureaucrats than the day I took office. I don't think anybody has cut more spending anywhere, anytime. We've been ranked the most pro-life state 6 years in a row since I've been governor. We have fought for and implemented statewide school choice. We put our own Second Amendment in the state constitution, 8 credit upgrades. more people working than ever before at a higher income than ever before, and we reversed 25 years of outmigration. Now, when you do that, there is another side to this story. This is what the left will say when you ask them about me. They'll say, oh yeah, but as long as the governor is in office, there's never enough money for government. We're always cutting government. This is what I say to that. Absolutely right. Guilty as charged. Folks, we've got a decision to make. Are we going to grow the government economy or the real world economy? It is either or. It is mutually exclusive. Hillary Clinton, she wants to grow the government economy. She measures success in the government world, not the real world. 7 of the 10 fastest growing counties were in the Washington, D.C. area. That is not sustainable. That is not real growth. We measure success in the real world, not the government world. Now, we've also done other things. You may have seen after these horrific videos came out from Planned Parenthood. Well, the first thing we did was order an investigation. We asked the FBI, and we were working with the state of Texas, but we did more than that. You may have seen in Louisiana, Planned Parenthood doesn't perform any abortions, but they're trying to get permits to open a clinic in New Orleans. We said, we're not processing any permits. We're going to do this investigation instead. Earlier this week, we canceled their Medicaid contract, kicking them out of the Medicaid program in Louisiana. Now, I caused a little bit of a ruckus last night, and apparently got some folks on the left mad. I want to clarify my comments, because last night I said this. I said, Planned Parenthood better hope that Hillary Clinton wins this election. Because under President Jindal, in January of 2017, the Department of Justice, the IRS, and the rest of us are coming into Planned Parenthood. So after I was done, the media comes to me and the left says they're besides themselves. Well, governor is president. Are you really saying you're going to send the Department of Justice and the IRS to investigate and go after Planned Parenthood? I just want to clarify these comments. Not only am I going to send the Department of Justice and the IRS, I will send OSHA, EPA, and every federal agency I can think of to go after Planned Parenthood. This is barbaric. It sickens me to watch those videos. I am pro-life, but my argument to those that are not yet pro-life is even if you're not yet pro-life, there is no reason one dime of our taxpayer dollars needs to be going to this organization. So you're going to have candidates that will come talk to you and say they will fight ISIS. You'll come and have candidates come talk to you and say that they're going to try to balance the budget and they will repeal Obamacare, and that's great. But talk is just talk. I've got the backbone, I've got the bandwidth, I've got the experience to get us through this, to get the job done. We need a proven leader. I don't know about you, but the stakes of this election, as high as they were even raised higher after these outrageous Supreme Court decisions after just a few weeks ago. I don't know about you, but I was so disappointed where the Supreme Court in 1 week rewrote the law for the second time to save Obamacare, and then later try to redefine marriage. In 1 week. At the beginning of the week, Scalia says that words no longer have meanings when they're trying to rewrite the law, and then at the end of the week, Chief Justice Roberts says they're not following the Constitution. So in 1 week, they've decided they don't have time to read a dictionary or the Constitution. That happened to be the week that I declared my candidacy for president. I was in Iowa, and a bunch of reporters found me the morning of the second ruling, and they said, Governor, what do you think about this? I said, well, look, if they're just going to follow opinion polls, if they're not going to read the Constitution, maybe we could save some money and just close down the Supreme Court. What good are they if they're not doing their jobs? Now, Hillary Clinton didn't like that answer. She thought that was extreme, so I've got a compromise. Instead of getting rid of the entire Supreme Court, what if we just got rid of about 2/3 of the Supreme Court? I mean, there are 3 justices that got it right. I wouldn't mind keeping Alito and Thomas and Scalia. It's the other 6 I wouldn't mind getting rid of. But folks, I want to share with you a dirty little secret. There are a bunch of Republicans in D.C. that were actually happy that we lost. Now, what do I mean by that? They view marriage as a distraction. They don't want to do the hard work of repealing and replacing Obamacare. Only in D.C. would losing be a good thing. Now look, my Christian faith teaches me that marriage is between a man and a woman, and unlike Hillary Clinton, I'm not evolving with the polls or changing my positions. And I support federal efforts to give us our 10th Amendment rights back, but now the left is going after our First Amendment rights. They no longer believe in the right of religious liberty and freedom. I issued an executive order in Louisiana saying we're not going to discriminate against Christian individuals and business owners that have a traditional view of marriage. The ACLU sued me for that. They were for religious liberty before they were against religious liberty. They use our RFRA laws to defend the rights of other religious minorities, yet when Christians are being discriminated against, then they've shown their hypocrisy. You may have seen Hillary Clinton said, those of us that are pro-life need to have our religious views changed. I've got news for Hillary. My religious beliefs are between me and God Almighty, and I'm not changing them just because she doesn't like them. Let me say this slowly so that even Hillary Clinton can understand this. The United States of America did not create religious liberty. Religious liberty created the United States of America, and is the reason we're here today. I thought 2 minutes. Folks, I've got a different idea. In 2016, why don't we do something different for a change? Why don't we embrace our own principles? Jeb Bush says that we need to be willing to lose the primary in order to win the general election. I disagree with that. Let me translate that for you. That is the establishment saying we need to hide our conservative beliefs and try to get the left and the media to like us. I'm here to tell you, if we try to do that again, we will lose again, and we will deserve to lose again. America does not need a second liberal party. They don't need us to be a cheaper version of the Democratic Party. Let me close with this. As your commander-in-chief, I will get 4 things done. Number 1, I will repeal and replace all of Obamacare, and I'm the only candidate with a plan to get that done. Secondly, I will secure our borders, no comprehensive bill, no amnesty, and we will crack down on those sanctuary cities. Let's make the mayors and councilmen criminally liable for breaking federal law. They're accessories to all the crimes committed by these folks that shouldn't be here in the first place. Third, I will shrink the size of the federal government, and I will grow the private sector economy. And fourth and finally, I will invest in our military. We will stand with our allies. We will deter our enemies. I'm here to tell you, we will not allow Iran to become a nuclear power. We will stand with Israel as your commander-in-chief. As your commander-in-chief, I'll have the moral honesty to name the enemy we face. Islam has a problem, and it's called radical Islam. We are going to hunt them down and kill them. This president said at the Pentagon, well, we have to change their hearts and minds that we can't win this conflict with guns. Well, Mr. President, sometimes guns are useful when you have to kill murdering terrorists to defeat evil in the world. Folks, our best days as a country are ahead of us, not behind us. I will close by asking you to believe again. My dad taught me as a young child that Americans could do anything. I believed him then, and I believe him now. Ronald Reagan described us as being a shining city on a hill, but he said that freedom wasn't inevitable. Every generation has to choose for itself to renew those principles of freedom. Previous generations have spilt blood and treasure to give us the freedoms we enjoy today. This is our time to choose. I want you to elect somebody who's willing to go and do and say the things you're not supposed to be able to say and do. If you're looking for somebody to manage the slow decline of this once great country and a mediocrity, vote for somebody else. If you want somebody to get us off the path towards socialism, to restore the American dream, to rescue us from the European nightmare, I'm asking you to join our cause. Believe again in America. God bless y'all, and thank y'all very, very much for allowing me to come out today. Thank you.
Sally from Sarasota wants to know, why aren't Republicans responding line by line, lie by lie to President Obama's speech on the Iran deal?
Look, that's a great question. So the president comes out, first of all, we knew that he was narcissistic. We knew there were no limits to his ego, but now he's trying to compare himself to Ronald Reagan. Now, just line by line, so President Reagan negotiated from a position of strength, not weakness. He understood peace through strength. He invested in our military. This president's hollowing out our military. President Reagan understood he was trying to make the Soviet Union weaker and bring down the evil empire. President Obama's deal will strengthen Iran, giving them tens of billions of dollars, allowing them to become even closer and eventually a nuclear power, could start a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. President Reagan, most importantly, understood trust but verify. This president has given up anytime, anywhere verification. So the reality is that she asked a great question. You know, the president had the temerity to try to compare himself to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan strengthened America, stood with Israel. Our allies trusted her. Our enemies feared and respected us. President Obama is the first president that I know, that I remember, that doesn't believe in American exceptionalism. I used to go around saying he was the worst president, and my apologies, I know I'm in Atlanta. I used to go, or in the greater Atlanta area, I used to go around saying that he was the worst president since Jimmy Carter. After President Obama's re-election, I apologized. That was disrespectful to the president. So I publicly apologized to Jimmy Carter. That wasn't fair to Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter believed in American exceptionalism. He was just incompetent. So she is exactly right. Republicans should go line through line. The facts are on our side. This is a bad deal. Look, the president may not have been able to get a better deal, but America can get a better deal. His failure shouldn't become our failure.
This is a good question from Al in Texas. After the BP oil spill, the president shut down drilling in Louisiana off the shore. Has drilling and production resumed in the Gulf, and how did it affect economically Louisiana?
Oh, that's a great question. I strongly fought the moratorium. Look, I'm a lifelong resident of Louisiana, born and raised there. My kids are all born there. I want to see Louisiana's coast restored. I want to see Louisiana doing well, and we've fought to get that done. Thought the moratorium was a mistake. And I got to tell you, I remember having a conversation with Valerie Jarrett, and at one point she was chiding me because I was publicly opposing the moratorium, and she said, "Governor, why are you worried? Where are those rigs going to go? I mean, as long as there's oil down there, they're not going to leave." I said, "Jerry, Valerie, you know they're mobile platforms, right? You know this equipment's going to Brazil and Africa and other places." There was silence. I honestly don't think they realized this was mobile equipment that could easily pick up and leave, and once it's left, it's going to take a long time to get back. So where we are was a huge economic impact to our state. And you can't just flip a switch on and off. These are massive, massive investments in pieces of equipment. We eventually got back, it took us a couple of years, we eventually got back to where production was before the moratorium. But look, we lost a couple of years of growth, so we're not where we would have been, but we certainly got back to where we were before. Then the collapse in oil prices happened, and obviously that had its own impact, but it took us a while, and it was a very, very hard impact on thousands of blue-collar workers. So the next time you hear Hillary Clinton saying that she's for middle-class families, next time you hear President Obama saying he's for middle-class families, ask them, how does your moratorium, how do your EPA policies, how does that help to bring good-paying manufacturing jobs, we're not talking about minimum wage jobs, good-paying blue-collar manufacturing jobs back into this country, and I've got a plan to get us to be energy independent, bring those jobs back. How does their EPA overreach, how does their moratorium, but let's be honest, they want energy to be scarce, they want it to be expensive. There's an ideological rationale for their actions in the EPA. So the good news is we got back to where we were before this bill, but we didn't recover all that missed growth that we would have had if he hadn't done that moratorium.
Governor Bobby Jindal.
Thank y'all very, very much.
When you walk around to the other side, my parents are going to be interviewing you.
Right, look forward to it. Thank y'all very, very much.
I've gotten to know our next speaker not because he was governor. He was one of the candidates that we as Red Staters really got behind early in 2014 in his Republican primary for governor of the state of Nebraska. Pete Ricketts has been a free market believer and leader for a long time, helping with free market institutes around the country, a real belief that the free market can elevate people out of poverty. He also, and this is where we really first met, helped start the group called Ending Spending. And Pete was very concerned with Republicans in Congress who claimed to be small government and for free enterprise, but were using earmarks to jack up the cost of government, using it as the gateway drug to bigger government. So Pete got together with other family members and friends, and they started Ending Spending, and they began not just going after Democrats, but after Republicans who were abusing the earmark system to drive up the scope of government. He wasn't afraid to take on his own side. He's a real believer in saying no to his own side. He also, you know, growing up, my best friend was from Chicago and was a Cubs fan. And Pete not only is a Cubs fan, his family owns the Cubs. So I really like him, even if the Cubs won't go to the World Series one day. No offense to the Atlanta Braves, but dear God, Atlanta, come on. Friends, listen, this is a guy who he's willing to tell his own side no. He's been willing to be a champion of free markets in Nebraska. He's been willing to be a champion of families through the free markets. He doesn't just preach it, he actually believes it and practices it. Really is just fantastic to have him at his first Red State gathering. The governor of Nebraska, Pete Ricketts.
Thank you, Eric. Hey, folks, how you doing? Thank you very much, Eric. I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and also Eric endorsed me during my primary. I had a very competitive primary, and so I very much appreciate that as well. Maybe just a little bit of background on myself. I come from a business background. I was the former chief operating officer of the online brokerage firm that is now called TD Ameritrade. And I ran for Senate in 2006, and at that time, actually, that's when I first came out against earmarks. Lost that race pretty handily to Ben Nelson, the famous Cornhusker kickback guy. You ever heard of him? But I stayed involved. I really became like you all. I helped start a free market think tank, a watchdog group, got involved with the grassroots. And it's important because politics is run by the people who show up. And that's why I want to thank all of you here today for showing up, for being a part of how we turn this country around, for helping to educate your fellow citizens on why we need conservative policies to keep this a great country. Because if we don't, we will end up, as Governor Jindal was saying, in that European nightmare. So thank you very much for what you all do. And clap for yourselves, that's good. So I was hired by the people of Nebraska last November. And the reason they hired me was to take my business skills and bring them to government to make it work for the people in Nebraska. And I got to say, I'm encouraged as I look around the country because we see other business leaders who are now stepping up to try to do the same thing, or people who actually preceded me, really. Think about Rick Scott in Florida, Bill Haslam in Tennessee, Rick Snyder in Michigan, Doug Ducey just got elected the same time I did for Arizona. So we're seeing business leaders get elected, and it's important because the salvation of this country will not come from Washington, D.C. The salvation of this country will come from the states. That's where the innovation comes from. So what I've been working on in Nebraska is what all governors ought to be working on, which is how do you grow the state? How do you create more and better paying jobs? How do you create even brighter futures for our people? And to do that, I've been focused on 3 broad categories. So I thought I'd talk about those here today, and then we'll, if we have time left over, which I'm sure we will, we'll have some questions and answers. So what we're focusing on in Nebraska is starting with becoming more competitive when it comes to taxes. Again, if we can return more of the money back to the people, that gives them the opportunity to be able to invest it and create those jobs. And the way we get sustainable tax relief is by cutting government, cutting that growth, slowing it down, allowing our revenues to continue to grow so that we can give more money back to the people. In my first budget, so I took over in November and had to get a budget ready in about 2 months, we cut the growth of government nearly in half. And because we were able to do that, we were able to take up one of our tax relief programs by 45%. And so in this biennium right now that we're in Nebraska, we will deliver over $400 million in tax relief back to the citizens of Nebraska. Now, to do that, what I'm doing is bringing the